Most people hear the word loner and they immediately diagnose a defect. Broken, bitter, socially awkward, secretly arrogant. You've seen the labels. You've probably used them. Because it's comforting to believe that anyone who walks alone must be missing something you have. But Jung noticed a different pattern. Some people don't isolate because they can't connect. They isolate because they connect too well, too fast, too deeply. They read the room before the room even speaks. They catch the micro-shifts, the hidden resentments, the fragile egos hiding behind jokes. And once you can see that clearly, you start paying a price for proximity. Here's what most people don't understand. The empath loner isn't anti-social. They're anti-performance. They're anti-fake. They're anti the unspoken contract that says, I'll pretend not to notice your manipulation if you pretend to like me. That's why they scare certain people. You've met them at a party, standing near the edge like they're watching weather move across a sky. They speak when there's something real to say, and they go silent when the room turns into a marketplace. They don't laugh on cue. They don't overshare to purchase intimacy. They don't trade secrets like poker chips. And that absence of performance makes everyone else feel exposed. In a culture where belonging is bought with compliance, the one person who won't pay looks suspicious, not because they are hostile, but because they are free. And freedom is always threatening. Because the social world isn't always built on friendship, it's built on leverage, on gossip as currency, on alliances, subtle dominance games, emotional debt. Most groups don't run on truth. They run on mood management. Someone has to absorb tension. Someone has to smooth things over. Someone has to laugh at the wrong joke so nobody feels exposed. The empath loner used to be that person, until they weren't. And when they stop volunteering their nervous system as a public utility, the whole atmosphere changes. Manipulators can't read them. Energy vampires can't hook into them. The guilt trippers can't find a soft spot. The people who live by social control suddenly meet someone who doesn't need the group's approval, and that's a kind of power most humans can't tolerate. So they call the loner cold, judgmental, too intense, anything but the real reason. You can't steer someone who refuses to be steered. If you've ever felt unsettled by a quiet person who keeps no friends, ask yourself why. Is it because they're empty, or because they're not available for the usual transactions? Are you afraid they'll judge you? Or are you afraid they'll see you? Jung would say the psyche always protects what it knows is valuable, and sometimes the protection looks like distance. High perception plus high boundaries doesn't create loneliness, it creates refusal. Refusal to participate in unconscious games. Refusal to bond through shared enemies. Refusal to keep people close just to prove you're normal. Well said. This is not social failure. This is social intelligence that became unwilling to lie. And here's the open loop most people miss. Nobody becomes this way for no reason. Something happened. Something taught them that closeness can be a trap, that friends can be surveillance, that warmth can be used as a leash. Once that lesson lands, they don't just withdraw, they recalibrate. The question isn't whether they can love. The question is what it costs you to be near them when you're still living on masks. Because when an empath loner stops playing social chess, they don't become softer. They become clear. And clarity is dangerous to anyone who survives on confusion. Once, the empath loner was the opposite of what they are now. They were available, responsive. The person who replied fast, showed up early, stayed late. The one everyone described as easy to talk to. Not because life was easy, but because they made it easy for everyone else. They translated emotion effortlessly. They could hear what you meant beneath what you said. They could feel a fight coming before the first insult landed. They noticed the sadness behind sarcasm, the smile that didn't reach the eyes, the friendliness that carried a hidden demand. They became the safe friend, the buffer, the human shock absorber. If a group was tense, they softened it. If someone was spiraling, they stabilized them. If two people were at war, they became the negotiator, and the world rewarded them for it. People called them mature, wise, so grounded. But it was never groundedness. It was hypervigilance wearing a halo. The hidden cost is that this kind of empath rarely attracts healthy intimacy first. They attract need, unstable people, hungry people, people with unresolved shadows who feel relief around someone willing to carry what they refuse to face. Jung called this unconscious participation. You become entangled with the emotional undercurrent of the room, absorbing what nobody admits, holding the weight nobody wants. You don't just relate to others. You participate in them unconsciously. So the jealous friend finds you and calls it loyalty. The needy friend finds you and calls it connection. The charming user finds you and calls it soulmate. And because you can feel everyone's inner weather, you confuse proximity with truth. You think, if I understand them, I can help them. If I help them, they'll love me. That's the bargain, not spoken, but lived. Meanwhile, covert competition grows in the background. Without meaning to, you become a mirror. You see through the jokes, through the false humility, through the little status plays people make to feel safe. And people can sense being seen, so they start testing. A small betrayal to see if you'll protest. A disrespectful comment disguised as humor. A boundary crossed by accident. You forgive, explain, smooth it over because you've been trained to keep the peace. You confuse tolerance with love and endurance with virtue. And then something happens. Not a collapse, not a breakup. It's quiet, a missing invitation. A group chat that goes silent when you ask a direct question. A friend who takes what you shared in vulnerability and uses it later as a weapon. A person you defended for years turns on you the moment you stop providing. The betrayal isn't just pain, it's information. This is the cold clarity event. The moment you stop romanticizing the social world and start reading it like a strategist. You look back and realize how many friendships were actually transactions. Access to your attention, access to your empathy, access to your status as the reasonable one, access to your free therapy. And the moment you stop paying, the relationship reveals itself. Not with words, but with absence, with contempt, with escalation. Jung observed that when the unconscious becomes conscious, relationships reorganize. What was held together by denial can't survive clear perception. You don't become introverted. You become uninterested in unconscious bargaining. You stop entering rooms where you're expected to perform emotional labor just to earn belonging. So the loner phase begins as self-protection. Silence feels like oxygen. Solitude feels like detox. You don't miss people. You miss the fantasy of being met. You withdraw to hear your own thoughts again, to feel your own body again, to find where your emotions end and other people's begin. But then solitude evolves. It becomes a discipline. Selective association becomes a psychological strategy. You start choosing connection the way a surgeon chooses instruments, carefully, cleanly, without sentimentality. You don't collect friends to prove you're lovable. You don't stay to avoid looking cold. You learn a brutal truth. Loneliness is painful, but counterfeit intimacy is poison. And once you learn that, your world gets smaller, but sharper. Fewer faces, fewer words, more truth. more self-respect. And that's when the real transformation starts, because withdrawal isn't the end, it's the doorway. What happens after withdrawal isn't emptiness, it's development. And it doesn't unfold like a motivational poster. It unfolds like a weapon being cleaned, sharpened, and finally handled with intention. Jung would say, this is what occurs when instinct stops begging for approval and starts obeying truth. The empath loner doesn't become better at socializing. They become socially untouchable, not because they hate people, but because people can no longer get purchase on them. And that shift follows 3 stages. Stage 1, the social mirror. This is the first thing that scares people, because it looks like coldness. The empath loner stops performing warmth. They stop laughing to reduce tension. They stop using softness as a safety tool. They stop cushioning the room from itself. When someone tells a manipulative story, they don't rush to validate it. When someone fishes for pity, they don't automatically bite. When someone drops a subtle insult disguised as a joke, they don't do the old dance where they pretend it didn't happen to keep the mood pleasant. They just reflect. Not with aggression, not with revenge, with accuracy. The same tone you bring is the tone you receive. The same respect you offer is the respect you get back. The same ambiguity you weaponize is returned to you as silence. And that is unbearable to groups that run on hierarchy games, because hierarchy requires participation. It requires someone to play the role of nice, someone to over-explain, someone to doubt themselves so the group can keep its illusions intact. The social mirror makes people see their own motives. The clout chaser realizes they can't impress you. The gossip addict realizes you won't join their little ritual of bonding through assassination. The covert narcissist realizes you won't react the way they need you to react. And the moment they can't control your emotional response, their entire strategy collapses. So they call you intimidating. They call you too serious. They say you've changed, but what they mean is you stopped being useful. Stage 2, the closed gate. This is where it gets dangerous, not because the empath loner becomes violent, but because they become unbuyable. They don't avoid people. They filter ruthlessly. They stop granting access as a default, and they start treating access like a privilege. Not everyone gets your attention. Not everyone gets your energy. Not everyone gets your inner world. The unhealed empath was an open door. Anyone could walk in with a crisis, a sob story, a need, a request wrapped in, "I just miss you." The healed loner becomes a threshold with a guardian. And that guardian is not cruel, it's precise. Fake intimacy makes them nauseous now. The sudden oversharing in the first conversation, the forced familiarity, the performative vulnerability designed to create obligation, the constant emotional dumping with no responsibility, the endless gossip that pretends to be just concern. They can feel the extraction before the person even asks for what they want because they've seen the pattern too many times. And here's the part that drives manipulators insane. The closed gate doesn't argue, it doesn't defend itself, it doesn't provide a speech, it doesn't debate your entitlement to them, it simply doesn't open. No explanation, no closure, no emotional bargaining. That silence is a form of power, because most social control depends on your willingness to explain yourself. If you explain, they can attack your reasons. If you justify, they can negotiate. If you defend, you've already accepted their authority to judge your boundary. But the empath loner doesn't treat their boundary as a discussion. They treat it as reality. And that is why social climbers and covert narcissists fear them. You can't shame someone who doesn't need your approval. You can't guilt-trip someone who refuses to carry what isn't theirs. You can't hook someone who won't chase your validation. If you can't be bribed by belonging, you are uncontrollable. Stage 3. Strategic solitude. This is where the empath loner becomes something most people will never understand. Solitude stops being a wound and becomes a weapon. Not a weapon against people, a weapon against noise, against confusion, against the emotional infections that spread through groups. Alone, their nervous system finally calms down. And when the nervous system calms down, perception becomes terrifyingly sharp. With no constant social input, their intuition stops being interrupted. Their body speaks clearly again. They don't need to think their way into decisions. They sense alignment immediately. They can predict social outcomes fast because they're not emotionally entangled. They see who's aligning, who's extracting, who's competing. They see what someone wants from them before that person admits it to themselves. This is Jung's differentiated perception in action, the ability to read psychological information accurately because you're not drowning in other people's projections. The empath loner becomes a human lie detector, not through mysticism, but through years of forced pattern recognition. Every subtle shift in voice, every contradiction between words and energy, every familiar sequence that ends the same way, you've logged it all. And now, in solitude, you can finally access the database without distortion. Here's the twist that most people miss. At this stage, they could dominate socially if they wanted to. They understand human psychology too well. They know how status works, how insecurity works, how group dynamics can be steered with one well-timed sentence. They know what people crave and what people fear. They could weaponize it. They could play the same games and win harder than the players. But they don't. Because the final mark of integration isn't power, it's restraint. Jung's shadow integration doesn't turn you into a saint. It gives you access to traits you were forced to suppress: assertiveness, refusal, cold boundaries, the willingness to disappoint people, the capacity to walk away without rescuing anyone from the consequences of their behavior. Those traits return not as rage, but as tools. And once those tools are conscious, the empath loner becomes sovereign. They don't need to control anyone because they've finally learned the only thing worth controlling: their own attention, their own peace, their own inner state. That's what makes them socially untouchable. Not superiority, not arrogance, freedom. The kind of freedom that makes parasites starve and healthy people exhale, because for the first time, connection is no longer purchased with self-betrayal. When an empath loner steps out of the social machine, it doesn't just change them, it destabilizes everyone around them. Because dysfunctional systems don't run on honesty. They run on one quiet role: the person who absorbs the tension so nobody else has to. The peacemaker, the translator, the one who smooths things over, apologizes first, explains everyone's behavior, carries the emotional debt so the group can pretend it's fine. That person disappearing is not a small event, it's structural collapse. Most social groups survive through unspoken contracts, loyalty through gossip, bonding through shared enemies, belonging through compliance. You're in as long as you laugh at the right people, hate the right people, and never threaten the fragile hierarchy by being too honest. People call it friendship, but it's really a survival pact. Don't expose me, and I won't expose you. The empath loner breaks the spell by refusing to participate. They don't play along when the room needs a scapegoat. They don't trade secrets for closeness. They don't pretend to agree just to keep access. They stop being the emotional buffer, and suddenly everyone has to feel what they were outsourcing: the awkwardness, the resentment, the insecurity, the truth. And this is where the world splits into two reactions. Some people evolve. They feel the loner's boundaries and recognize integrity. They stop testing. They stop demanding free emotional labor. They show up cleaner, more honest. They approach slowly, respectfully, not with a performance, but with substance. These people don't fear the loner's solitude because they're not trying to take from them, they're trying to meet them. And when a healthy person meets an empath loner, something rare happens. There's no manipulation required, no games, no emotional bargaining, just real connection, earned, not assumed. But others reveal themselves. When the parasites can't feed, they call you evil. When the gossip economy loses a customer, it brands you cold. When the social climbers can't leverage you, they say you think you're better. They recruit others. They rewrite the story. They turn your absence into a moral failure because it protects them from one terrifying possibility. Maybe you left because you finally saw them clearly. And here's the part that shows the empath loner's real power. They don't argue, they observe. They don't chase their reputation through rooms that never deserved their presence. They don't explain their boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding them. They just watch how people react to the word no, how they respond when access is no longer free, how quickly love turns into punishment when you stop complying. The loner doesn't need closure. The reaction is the closure. Jung's conclusion was brutal and liberating. Solitude isn't the absence of love. It's the end of unconscious bargaining. It's the refusal to keep paying for belonging with self-betrayal. It's the moment you stop calling transactions friendship just because they come wrapped in smiles. So no, they keep no friends, not because they're broken. They keep no friends because they refuse counterfeit intimacy, because they'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded in performance. Because they've learned that peace is not found in people, it's protected from the ones who threaten it. If you recognize this pattern, comment one sentence: I don't bargain for belonging. Subscribe if you want more Jungian psychology on power dynamics, shadow integration, and the quiet forms of strength most people never develop. Because the next layer of this transformation is even rarer, and it changes how you see everyone.